The breakfast plates were eventually emptied, the last crumbs of fresh bread disappearing as the morning bustle of the Meadowview Inn carried on around them. Travellers came and went through the front doors. Merchants discussed routes over mugs of coffee, and somewhere upstairs a child laughed as their parents prepared for the day ahead. For a brief moment, it felt normal. A feeling that never seemed to last long for vault hunters. Cliff leaned back in his chair and let out a satisfied sigh. "I got to admit," he said, "this place might be the nicest place we've been since Marcus kicked us out of that carriage." Mr. Phantom stood first, adjusting the strap of his rifle across his shoulder. "That's exactly why we should leave before something terrible happens." Suidas nodded in agreement. "Seems to be a pattern." The three of them gathered their gear and thanked the inn staff before stepping back outside into the cool mountain air. Meadowview was fully awake now. Morning sunlight reflected off the rivers, cutting through town. Shopkeepers opened their doors. Farmers moved carts loaded with produce through the streets. The scent of flowers drifted on the breeze coming from the surrounding meadows. It was peaceful. Perhaps too peaceful. The vault hunters followed the eastern path Cedric had described. As they moved farther from the center of town, the distant roar of the waterfall grew louder. The rivers branching through Meadowview became wider and faster, their currents churning white against smooth stones. Ahead, they could already see mist rising above the treetops. The rapid river. Beyond it, somewhere among the cliffs and rolling hills, stood the Tumbling temple, and hopefully the missing cleric Elidyr. Cliff looked toward the increasingly violent water and scratched the back of his head. "You know, now that we're actually getting close to this river, I kinda hope the boat option is nearby." Suidas smirked. "Scared of a few lily pads?" "No," Cliff replied immediately. "I'm scared of becoming part of the river." Mr. Phantom silently continued walking, though there was the faintest hint of amusement in his posture. The path curved ahead through lush greenery and wildflowers, slowly descending toward the rushing water. Whatever route they chose, one thing was certain. The journey to the Tumbling temple had begun. The farther the vault hunters traveled from Meadowview, the louder the river became. What had once seemed like a peaceful stream cutting through the plateau revealed itself to be something far more dangerous up close. White water crashed violently between jagged rocks, churning and twisting with enough force to sweep away anything unfortunate enough to fall in. The boat Cedric had mentioned was nowhere to be seen. Whether it had drifted away, been borrowed, or smashed against the rapids long ago, none of them knew. What they did see was a winding trail of massive lily pads stretching across the river. Cliff stared at them, then at the water, then back at the lily pads, then back at the water again. "Oh, this is a terrible idea," Suidas smirked. "You afraid of flowers now?" "I'm afraid of becoming a decorative corpse downstream." The first leap belonged to Suidas. She crouched low and launched herself across the rushing water, landing cleanly on the nearest lily pad. It dipped beneath her weight before springing back up. "See," she called back. "Easy." Cliff looked unconvinced. Still, he followed. The hunter jumped from pad to pad with surprising agility. A few times his boots slipped on the wet surfaces, sending sprays of water into the air, but he managed to keep his balance. Soon he reached the opposite side. "Still alive!" he shouted. Mr. Phantom was lost. The necromancer stared silently at the river for a moment, then at the lily pads, then at the river again. Suidas crossed her arms. "Phantom, I'm evaluating." "You're stalling." "I am evaluating very carefully." Cliff laughed from the opposite bank. "Just jump, you spooky bastard." With a defeated sigh, Mr. Phantom finally made his move. The first lily pad. Success. Success. The third. Success. The fourth. His foot landed awkwardly. The lily pad tilted. Mr. Phantom's eyes widened behind his mask. Oh no. The pad rolled completely beneath him. His arms pinwheeled wildly as he teetered over the raging rapids. For one horrifying second he hung there. Then gravity won. He started falling. A gloved hand shot out. Cliff lunged forward from the riverbank, dropping flat on his stomach and grabbing Mr. Phantom's wrist mere inches before the rapids swallowed him. The current roared beneath them. Mr. Phantom dangled over the rushing water. Cliff strained. "You're heavier than you look." "That's because I'm carrying all the important equipment." You carry one rifle and a stick. It's an ancient magical relic." Suidas doubled over, laughing. Cliff groaned and finally managed to haul Mr. Phantom onto solid ground. Both men collapsed onto the grass, breathing heavily. For a moment nobody spoke, then Suidas started laughing again. Cliff joined in. Even Mr. Phantom let out a reluctant chuckle. "Let's never do that again," he said. The Vault Hunters gathered themselves and looked ahead. Beyond the river, the path climbed toward rolling hills and ancient woodland. Somewhere beyond those trees stood the Tumbling Temple, home of Elidyr, and for the first time since arriving in Meadowview, they could see it. Far in the distance, partially hidden among cliffs and greenery, stood the silhouette of an ancient structure rising above the tree line. Their next destination awaited. The Vault Hunters stood for a moment on the opposite side of the river, taking in the sight before them. The path wound upward through gentle hills and towering trees until it finally opened into the courtyard of the Tumbling Temple. It was beautiful. Massive ancient trees surrounded the courtyard, their branches stretching high overhead like a natural canopy. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden beams that danced across the ground. Moss and ivy crept between weathered cobblestones, reclaiming the stonework one crack at a time. The place felt untouched by war, untouched by the greed of the guilds. It felt sacred. At the far end of the courtyard stood a grand staircase leading upward to a set of enormous doors. The ancient wood had been stained a deep red and carved with intricate designs that time had failed to erase. Every inch of the doors displayed remarkable craftsmanship. Suidas let out a low whistle. Not bad for a place nobody visits anymore. Mr. Phantom approached the entrance and placed both hands against the massive doors. With a deep groan of old hinges, the doors slowly swung inward. The temple beyond was breathtaking. Towering stone arches stretched high overhead. Ancient stained glass windows painted the floor in patches of red, gold, and blue light. Though age had taken its toll, much of the structure remained remarkably intact. Some sections of the walls had crumbled, allowing nature to reclaim portions of the cathedral. In the far corner, an enormous tree had grown through the stone itself, its trunk bursting through one wall before disappearing through the roof above. The Wonderlands had a habit of mixing beauty and ruin together, and nowhere demonstrated that better than this place. In the center of the cathedral, kneeling before a weathered altar, was a lone man, brown-skinned, clothed in a flowing red cloak, hands folded in prayer. The man opened his eyes as the Vault Hunters entered. He rose calmly to his feet and turned toward them. "Well," he said with a warm smile, "it's nice to see some Vault Hunters still out and about." Suidas wasted no time. "We're looking for Deianira." Elidyr nodded knowingly. "Deianira was at Mistal Village the last time I heard from her. She was attempting to secure iridium before the guilds discovered the mines there." His gaze drifted around the cathedral. A small smile touched his face. "You know, it is very peaceful here." The cleric slowly walked beside one of the ancient stone pillars, running a hand across its weathered surface. This temple was once full of life. Pilgrims, worshippers, families. People would travel for days just to visit this place. His voice softened. But over the years, people stopped believing in higher powers. They started believing in guilds instead. Atlas, Hyperius, Maluan, they put their faith in armies and weapons. Then the wars started. His eyes settled on the Vault Hunters. "I'm assuming you haven't traveled all this way simply to ask about Deianira. Has something happened at Shadow Grove?" The atmosphere immediately darkened. Cliff stepped forward. Slowly he explained everything. The attack, the dead Atlas soldiers, the destruction, the Nibelnomicon, Helatrix and Artemis, the massacre. The silence that followed felt heavier than any battle they had fought. Elidyr's expression grew more troubled with every word. By the time Cliff finished, the cleric stood motionless. "Well," he finally said, "this is very bad news." He lowered his head briefly in thought. "The Shadow Council needs to be reunited immediately." The warmth in his voice remained, but urgency had replaced its calmness. "I will make haste back to Shadow Grove." He walked toward the entrance, gathering a satchel and a staff resting near the altar. Before passing through the great doors, he turned back toward the Vault Hunters one final time. "Stay safe, my friends." His smile returned. "And try to come back in one piece." Cliff grinned. No promises. Elidyr chuckled softly before descending the temple steps and disappearing down the path toward Meadowview. The great cathedral fell silent once more. The Vault Hunters stood alone among the ancient stone arches. They had found Elidyr. Only one member of the Shadow Council remained, Deianira, and according to everyone they had spoken to, finding her would be considerably more difficult.